I watched through the living room window as the enormous HOA plow came down the street for the third time that morning, and my stomach twisted into knots because I knew exactly where all that snow was going. My mother's house sat at the corner of Meadowbrook Lane and Pine Ridge Drive in Littleton, Colorado, and for some reason the city planners back in 1972 had decided that corner lot would be perfect. Except nobody accounted for what happens during heavy snowfall when you have two streets converging at one property. "Victor, they cannot keep doing this," my mother said from behind me, her voice shaking with either cold or anger, probably both. She had wrapped herself in 3 blankets and still looked like she was freezing. The thermostat reads 68 degrees, but at 74 years old, Mom always ran cold these days. "I know, Mom. I will handle it." I pulled out my phone and started recording as the plow made its approach. The driver, some guy I had never seen before, was clearly following orders. He angled that blade perfectly to send every ounce of snow straight into my mother's driveway. Not just the driveway, though. The white wall grew higher and higher, cascading over her mailbox, her carefully maintained garden that she had covered with burlap for winter, and the bottom 3 feet of her front door. This was not the first time. This was the 15th time this winter. Back in November, when the HOA had sent around the notice about enhanced snow removal services, my mother had been thrilled. She paid her dues on time every month, never caused trouble, kept her lawn immaculate during the warm months, and figured she had finally earned some benefit from the $600 quarterly fee. The Pinewood Hills Homeowners Association ran this neighborhood with an iron fist, and at the helm was Patricia Morrison, a 47-year-old woman who treated the HOA presidency like she was running a military dictatorship. I had dealt with Patricia before. 3 years ago, she had cited my mother for having her trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. Never mind that it was collection day, just 3 hours early. Mom had been recovering from hip surgery, and I had taken the cans out the night before to help her. Patricia had shown up with her clipboard, her perfectly styled blonde hair, and her expression that looked like she had been sucking on lemons for the past decade. The plow finished its work and drove away, leaving behind a wall of snow that had to be 7 feet tall at its peak. I stopped recording and immediately called the HOA office. The phone rang 6 times before someone picked up. "Pinewood Hills HOA, this is Deborah speaking." "Deborah, this is Victor Walsh. I need to speak with Patricia Morrison immediately." "I am afraid Mrs. Morrison is in a meeting right now." "Can I take a message?" "Yeah, here is the message. Your plow just buried my elderly mother's house for the 15th time this winter. The snow is blocking her front door, her driveway, and has destroyed her mailbox. I have video evidence of your driver deliberately angling the plow to dump everything on her property." There was a pause. "Sir, snow removal is a community service. We cannot control where the snow goes." "That is interesting because I have 15 videos showing your driver very much controlling where the snow goes. Every single time, it goes to 2847 Meadowbrook Lane, my mother's house. Nobody else on this street has snow piled 7 feet high. I will pass your concerns along to Mrs. Morrison." "You do that, and tell her I will be at the next board meeting with an attorney if this is not resolved today." I hung up and looked at my mother. She had moved to the front door and was staring at the wall of snow with tears running down her face. "I cannot get out," she whispered. "Victor, I cannot get to my car. I have a doctor's appointment on Thursday." "I will clear it, Mom. Do not worry. You cleared it yesterday and the day before and last week. You have your own family, your own job. You cannot keep taking time off to shovel snow." She was right. I owned a small construction company, Walsh Brothers Construction, though there was no brother anymore since my younger sibling had moved to Arizona 5 years back to escape the snow. January and February were slow months anyway, but I still had 3 projects that needed my attention. Instead, I was spending 4 hours every other day shoveling snow from my mother's property because the HOA had decided to weaponize their snow removal service. I went out to my truck and grabbed the shovel. The temperature was 14 degrees, and the wind cut through my jacket like knives. I started digging, throwing snow back into the street, which I knew would just prompt another visit from the plow. This was intentional. Patricia wanted my mother out of this house. 3 hours later, I had cleared enough space for Mom to open her front door and access her driveway. My back screamed, my hands were raw despite the gloves, and I was pretty sure I had frostbite forming on my ears. I went inside to warm up. "There is soup on the stove," Mom said. She had made chicken noodle, my favorite since childhood. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where I had done homework 30 years ago, and ate in silence for a few minutes. "Why does she hate me so much?" Mom finally asked. I had been wondering the same thing. "I think I know why." Mom looked up at me with those watery blue eyes that had comforted me through every childhood nightmare and teenage heartbreak. "You remember when the Hendersons wanted to build that addition on their house 2 years ago? The one that would have blocked the morning sun from my garden. Right. And you showed up at the HOA meeting and presented the survey showing that their addition would actually be 3 feet over the property line onto HOA common ground." Mom nodded slowly. Patricia was very upset. Patricia was furious because the Hendersons are her friends. "You made her look bad when the board had to deny their permit. She has been looking for revenge ever since." "That is insane. I was just following the rules." "Patricia does not care about rules. She cares about power." My phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Hello." "Mr. Walsh, this is Patricia Morrison from Pinewood Hills HOA. I received a message that you have some concerns about our snow removal service." Her voice was sickeningly sweet, the kind of tone that made you want to check your back for knives. "Patricia, your plow has deliberately buried my mother's house 15 times this winter. I have video evidence. This ends now." "Mr. Walsh, I assure you this is completely unintentional. Snow has to go somewhere during removal operations. Your mother's corner lot simply happens to be in an unfortunate location." "Then explain why the other corner lot, the Petersons' house, has maybe 6 inches of snow in their driveway while my mother has 7 feet. Every situation is unique. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to send a crew to properly clear my mother's property. You are going to instruct your drivers to distribute the snow evenly throughout the neighborhood, and you are going to replace the mailbox that your plow destroyed." "Or what, Mr. Walsh?" "Or I file a harassment lawsuit against the HOA and you personally. I have documentation of every incident, video evidence, and I am pretty sure a jury would love to hear about how an HOA targeted a 74-year-old widow." There was a long pause. "I will see what I can do. But I want to be clear, Mr. Walsh. Your mother is still bound by all HOA regulations. If she violates any covenants, there will be consequences." "Is that a threat?" "It is a reminder. Good day, Mr. Walsh." She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, my soup getting cold. "What did she say?" Mom asked. "She is going to make our lives more difficult." I was right. The next morning there was a notice on my mother's door: violation of HOA Covenant Section 3.14, excessive snow accumulation on property. Fine, $500. I called Patricia back immediately. "You have got to be kidding me. You buried her property with snow and now you are fining her for having snow on her property. The covenant is very clear, Mr. Walsh. Homeowners are responsible for maintaining their property in a neat and presentable condition. The excessive snow accumulation is unsightly and violates community standards. Your plow put that snow there. The covenant does not address how the snow arrives, only that it must be removed in a timely manner. Your mother has 48 hours to clear the snow or the fine will double. I drove to my attorney's office that afternoon. Robert Chen had helped me with business contracts for years, and I trusted him completely. "This is retaliation," Robert said after I explained the situation and showed him the videos. "Clear as day. The problem is HOA cases can drag on for years. They have deep pockets from all those dues, and they will bury you in legal fees trying to prove your case. So what do I do? Document everything. Every video, every phone call, every fine. Build an airtight case. In the meantime, I will send them a letter making it clear that we are prepared to pursue legal action if the harassment continues. That will just make Patricia angrier. Probably. But it will also make the HOA board nervous. Patricia might be president, but she answers to the board. If they think she is exposing them to legal liability, they might rein her in." I left Robert's office feeling slightly better, but that feeling evaporated when I got back to my mother's house and saw another plow driver creating an even bigger wall of snow. This time, the snow was piled so high it covered her front windows. I parked my truck and got out, rage making my hands shake. The plow driver, a different guy from this morning, glanced at me and kept going. He was deliberately, methodically burying my mother's house. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward the plow. "Stop! Stop right now!" The driver ignored me and made another pass, adding another layer to the wall. I pulled out my phone and started recording again. "I am recording you right now. This is deliberate property damage and harassment." The driver finally stopped and rolled down his window. He was maybe 30 years old with a scraggly beard and the look of someone who was just following orders. "Look, man, I am just doing what they pay me to do," he said. "Who told you to bury this specific house?" "The HOA lady, Morrison. She said this property needed extra attention because the owner was not maintaining it properly." "That is a lie. Who do you work for?" "Alpine Snow Removal. We are contracted by the HOA." I got his information and the company details, then called Alpine Snow Removal right there in the street. I explained the situation to the owner, a man named Gary who seemed genuinely concerned. "That is not right," Gary said. "We are supposed to distribute snow evenly. If Morrison is giving my drivers special instructions, that is a problem. I will talk to him. I want this snow moved. Now." "Sir, that is not how it works. We are paid to remove snow from streets, not to relocate it between properties." "Then I will do it myself." I spent the rest of that day and all of the next clearing snow. My mother watched from the window, occasionally bringing me hot coffee or soup. Neighbors walked by and I could see them talking, pointing. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked away quickly, probably afraid of becoming Patricia's next target. On the third day, I woke up to find another violation notice on my mother's door. This time it was for unauthorized snow placement in street. The fine was $750. I was done playing games. I called my buddy Dave, who owned a heavy equipment company. "I need to rent a bulldozer." "What are you doing, Vic?" "Returning some snow to its rightful owners." Dave was quiet for a moment. "When do you need it?" "Today." "I've got a Caterpillar D5 sitting in the yard. She is all yours, no charge." "Dave, I cannot just take your bulldozer for free." "Yes, you can. I live in Pinewood Hills too." Patricia fined my wife last month for having a wreath on our door past January 15th. Said it violated the seasonal decoration policy. I would drive that dozer myself if I had time. 2 hours later, Dave delivered the bulldozer on a flatbed truck. It was beautiful, bright yellow, and ready to move mountains. Or in this case, move mountains of snow. My mother came outside, wrapped in her winter coat. "Victor William Walsh, what are you doing?" Something I should have done weeks ago. "You are going to get in trouble." "I am already in trouble. Might as well make it worth it." I climbed into the bulldozer's cab. It had been a few years since I had operated one, but it came back quickly. The engine roared to life, and I felt every neighbor on the street peek through their curtains. I started with the massive pile blocking my mother's front door and windows. The blade cut through the snow like butter, pushing it back toward the street. But I did not stop there. I followed the street to where it curved toward Patricia Morrison's house. Her house was perfect, naturally. Tudor style with those fake decorative timbers, a 3-car garage, and a lawn that probably cost more to maintain than most people's mortgages. Her driveway was completely clear, not a single snowflake out of place. That was about to change. I positioned the bulldozer and started pushing. The snow from my mother's property flowed across the street in a white avalanche. I dumped the first load right at the end of Patricia's driveway, creating a wall about 4 feet high. Then I went back for more. By the fourth load, Patricia's front door opened and she came storming out in her designer winter coat and boots that probably cost more than my truck payment. "What do you think you are doing?" she screamed. "Snow removal," I called back over the engine noise. "Just redistributing the wealth, so to speak. This is illegal. This is property damage, really. Because when your plow did this to my mother's house 15 times, you said snow has to go somewhere. I am just following your logic." I made another pass, piling more snow in her driveway. The wall was now 6 feet tall and completely blocked access to her garage. Patricia was on her phone, pacing back and forth. I could not hear what she was saying, but I could guess. Probably calling the police. I did not stop. Load after load, I brought every single flake of snow that had been dumped on my mother's property and relocated it to Patricia's perfect driveway and lawn. Her carefully maintained landscaping disappeared under white drifts. Her decorative lamp posts became snow-covered pillars. Her front walk, which she probably paid someone to heat, vanished completely. Neighbors started coming out of their houses. Some were laughing. Some looked shocked. An older gentleman named Frank, who lived 3 doors down from my mother, actually started clapping. It took me about 90 minutes to move all the snow. When I finished, Patricia's property looked like a ski resort, and my mother's house was finally completely clear. I parked the bulldozer in Mom's driveway and climbed down just as 2 Littleton Police Department cruisers pulled up. 2 officers got out. The first one, a veteran cop named Officer Martinez, who I recognized from high school, walked over with his hand near his belt but not on his weapon. "Victor Walsh," he said. "Been a long time. Hey, Carlos, heard you made sergeant." I did. "Now, want to tell me what is going on here?" "We got a call about someone using a bulldozer to vandalize property." "Not vandalism, just returning what belonged to someone else." Patricia came rushing over. "Officer, arrest this man immediately. He has damaged my property. He is trespassing. He is operating heavy machinery without permits. He is blocking public streets. He is—" "Madam," Officer Martinez held up his hand. "One thing at a time. Mr. Walsh, is this your bulldozer?" "Borrowed it from Dave Richardson at Richardson Heavy Equipment." "You have permission to operate it?" "I do. Dave brought it here himself." Patricia's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. "That is irrelevant. He deliberately piled snow on my property. That is assault. That is vandalism. That is harassment. Is it?" Officer Martinez looked at Patricia. "Because we have actually gotten about 15 calls over the past 6 weeks from this address." He gestured to my mother's house. Multiple complaints about the HOA snow plows deliberately burying this specific property. Elderly resident, unable to access her home or vehicle. We documented every call. I had not known that. Mom must have been calling the police and never told me, not wanting to worry me. The second officer, a younger guy whose name tag Reed Thompson, was walking around Patricia's property taking pictures. "It is just snow," he said. "No structural damage, no broken windows, just snow." "Just snow," Patricia sputtered. "There are tons of it. My driveway is completely blocked. I cannot get my car out." "Welcome to the club," my mother said. She had walked over, moving slowly with her cane. "I have not been able to get my car out properly in 6 weeks." Officer Martinez pulled out his notepad. "Madam, are you Janet Walsh?" "I am." "And you have been calling about HOA snow plows burying your property?" "I have, officer. My son has video evidence if you need it. 15 separate incidents. The plow drivers have been deliberately dumping all the snow from 2 streets onto my property. I have missed doctor's appointments. I have been trapped in my house. I receive fines from the HOA for having too much snow, and then more fines when my son helps me clear it." Officer Thompson came back over. "I checked with dispatch. We have records of multiple complaints from this address regarding the HOA. We also have records of complaints about blocked fire access to this property. That is actually a violation of city code." Patricia's expression changed from anger to something closer to fear. "I do not control where the snow goes during removal operations." "Actually, you do," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have video of your plow driver telling me that you specifically instructed him to pile extra snow on this property. I also have recordings of our phone conversations where you admitted the plow operators follow your directions." "I never said that," Patricia snapped. "Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. I can play them right now if you would like." Officer Martinez looked tired. "Here is what is going to happen. Mr. Walsh, you need to move that bulldozer off the street. Mrs. Morrison, you are going to need to arrange for this snow to be cleared from your property. Mrs. Walsh, I recommend you file a formal complaint with the city about the HOA's snow removal practices. If they are blocking fire access, that is a serious issue." "That is it," Patricia said. "You are not going to arrest him." "For what? Moving snow?" "Mrs. Morrison, this looks like a civil dispute between you and the homeowner. Unless you want me to start investigating those reports about the HOA deliberately blocking an elderly resident's property, which could result in fines against the HOA, I suggest you work this out." Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and stalked back to her house, high-stepping through the snow drifts in her expensive boots. Officer Martinez turned to me. "Victor, I appreciate what you are trying to do here, but this is not the way to handle it." "What is the way?" "I have asked nicely, I have called repeatedly, I have documented everything, they keep doing it." "What am I supposed to do, Carlos?" he sighed. "File a formal complaint with the city, get a lawyer, make noise at HOA meetings, but pulling a stunt like this, it is only going to make things worse." He was probably right, but I did not regret it. Not for a second. The officers left, and slowly the neighbors went back inside. Dave came by to pick up the bulldozer, grinning ear to ear. "That was beautiful, man. Absolute poetry. Thanks for the loaner. Any time, and I mean that. If you need it again, you call me." I went back inside with my mother. She made tea and we sat at the kitchen table again. "You should not have done that," she said, but she was smiling. "Probably not. Patricia is going to make our lives miserable now." She was already making our lives miserable. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was thin and cool, covered in age spots, but her grip was strong. "Thank you, sweetheart. Nobody has stood up for me like that in a long time." Dad would have done the same thing. Your father would have done it 3 weeks ago. He never had your patience. We both laughed. Dad had passed away 4 years earlier, and I still missed him every day. He had been a contractor too, taught me everything I knew. He would have hated seeing Mom treated like this. The next morning, I found 3 new violation notices on my mother's door. Operating heavy machinery without HOA approval, creating a public disturbance. Unauthorized modification of neighborhood aesthetics. Each one carried a $1,000 fine. I took pictures of all of them and sent them to Robert Chen, my attorney. He called back within an hour. This is good. How is $3,000 in bogus fines good? Because now they are retaliating in writing. These charges are completely fabricated. There is no HOA covenant about heavy machinery. The police already determined you were not creating a public disturbance. An unauthorized modification of neighborhood aesthetics is so vague it would never hold up. Patricia is panicking and making mistakes. So what is our next move? I am filing an emergency injunction against the HOA to stop the fines and prevent further harassment. I am also requesting a full audit of their snow removal practices. And Victor, I am doing this pro bono. Robert, I cannot ask you to work for free. You are not asking. I am offering. My parents dealt with an HOA nightmare in Florida that nearly bankrupted them over a stupid property line dispute. I hate these little dictatorships. Let me do this. I felt a weight lift off my chest. Thank you. One more thing. I need you to attend the next HOA board meeting and present your evidence publicly. Get it on record. Force them to respond in front of the entire community. The next board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the Pinewood Hills Clubhouse. I spent the weekend preparing a presentation, compiling all the videos, organizing the documentation of fines and phone calls. Robert helped me put together a timeline that showed the clear pattern of harassment. Tuesday evening arrived cold and clear. I picked up my mother and drove to the clubhouse. The parking lot was already packed. Word had gotten around about the Bulldozer incident, and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Inside, the meeting room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the HOA board sat. Patricia was in the center, flanked by 4 other board members. I recognized 2 of them. Bill Henderson, whose house addition my mother had helped block, and Cynthia Ferguson, who I knew had been in Patricia's social circle for years. The other 2 board members were Tom Bradley and Susan Chen, who I did not know well but had heard were relatively reasonable people. The room was standing room only. I spotted Dave and his wife, Frank from down the street, and at least 40 other residents I recognized from the neighborhood. My mother sat in the front row, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Patricia called the meeting to order with a sharp crack of her gavel. We have a full agenda tonight, so let us keep things moving. First item, approval of last month's minutes. Point of order, I said, standing up. Patricia's eye twitched. We have not reached the open comment section, Mr. Walsh. I do not care. I am here to present evidence of criminal harassment and abuse of power by this HOA board, specifically by you, Mrs. Morrison. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Sit down, Mr. Walsh, or I will have you removed for disorderly conduct. Go ahead and try. I have invited 3 journalists to this meeting. That is Kelly Reed from the Denver Post, Marcus Johnson from Littleton Independent, and Sarah Chen, who runs the local news blog. I am sure they would love to hear about how you are threatening to remove a homeowner for trying to speak about documented abuse. I saw the 3 journalists I had contacted in the back row, all with their phones out, recording. Marcus even had a professional camera. Patricia's face went pale. Bill Henderson leaned over and whispered something to her. She nodded stiffly. Very well. The chair recognizes Victor Walsh. I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to the projector. The first video started playing, the plow deliberately angling to dump snow on my mother's property. "This is January 6th, I said. "First major snowfall of the year. Watch how the plow driver specifically angles the blade to push all the snow onto the corner property at 2847 Meadowbrook Lane. My mother's house." I played video after video, 15 separate incidents, each one clearly showing the same deliberate action. The room was completely silent except for the sound of the videos playing. Now let us talk about what happens on the other corner lot. I switched to videos showing the Peterson house. Same corner lot configuration, same two streets, but somehow the Petersons have a clear driveway after every snowfall. Why is that? Patricia tried to speak, but Susan Chen, one of the board members, held up her hand. "Let him finish." "Thank you," I said. "Now, when I called to complain about this pattern, I was told that snow has to go somewhere. When I cleared the snow myself, I was fined for excessive snow accumulation. When I cleared it again, I was fined for unauthorized snow placement. When I used a bulldozer to return the snow to a more equitable location, I was fined 3 more times for fabricated violations." I pulled up a spreadsheet showing all the fines. Total fines issued to my mother over a 6-week period, $7,250. For the crime of being the target of HOA harassment. Bill Henderson stood up. "This is absurd. You are making serious accusations without proof of intent." "Am I?" I played the audio recording of the plow driver admitting that Patricia had given him specific instructions to pile extra snow on my mother's property. Patricia shot to her feet. "That recording is illegal." "Actually, it is not. Colorado is a one-party consent state." I was part of the conversation, so I had every right to record it. The driver was lying. He was probably just trying to cover up his own mistakes. "So you are saying Alpine Snow Removal is providing you with substandard service, because I have their contract here." I pulled out a document that Robert had obtained through a public records request. According to this contract, the HOA is paying Alpine $45,000 per season for snow removal. The contract specifically states that snow should be distributed evenly throughout the community, and that corner properties should receive special attention to prevent excessive accumulation. Your own contract contradicts what you have been doing. Susan Chen was reading through some papers. "Patricia, did you give the snow removal company specific instructions about individual properties? I may have mentioned that the Walsh property needed attention." "What kind of attention?" Tom Bradley asked. He was a tall man with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had been in management his whole career. Patricia hesitated. "The property was not being properly maintained. Snow was accumulating. It was becoming an eyesore." "That is a lie," my mother said quietly. She stood up, leaning on her cane. "The snow was accumulating because your plows were putting it there. My son has been clearing it sometimes twice a day, and you have been fining me for his help. You want to know why you really hate me, Patricia? Because I stood up at a meeting and told the truth about your friends trying to build illegally. Because I dare to point out when you are wrong. You cannot stand anyone challenging you, so you decided to drive me out of my home." The room erupted. Multiple neighbors started shouting at once. Some were supporting my mother. Others were yelling about their own HOA complaints. Patricia was hammering her gavel, demanding order. "Enough." Tom Bradley stood up, and something about his voice cut through the chaos. "This meeting is out of order. Patricia, I am calling for an immediate vote to suspend you from the board pending an investigation." "You cannot do that," Patricia said. "Actually, According to our bylaws, any board member can call for a suspension vote if there is evidence of misconduct, and I have just seen plenty of evidence. All in favor, Susan Chen immediately raised her hand. I vote yes. Tom Bradley raised his hand. Yes. That left Bill Henderson and Cynthia Ferguson. They looked at each other, then at Patricia. Bill, Cynthia, you owe me, Patricia said. Remember that. Bill Henderson slowly shook his head. I am sorry, Patricia, but this has gone too far. Yes, I vote yes. Cynthia Ferguson looked like she wanted to cry, but she raised her hand too. Yes, Patricia stood there, her face frozen in shock. This is not over. Yes, it is, Tom Bradley said. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all HOA board duties. We will be conducting a full review of all your actions over the past 2 years. This includes a forensic audit of finances, review of all fines and violations issued, and interviews with the service contractors. If we find evidence of abuse of power or misappropriation of funds, we will be referring this matter to the proper authorities. Misappropriation of funds. Patricia's voice was shrill. How dare you? The snow removal contract is for $45,000, Tom said. Alpine snow removal's standard rate for a neighborhood this size is $30,000. I called them this afternoon. Someone has been pocketing the difference. We are going to find out who. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting room. Cynthia Ferguson followed her, and I could hear Patricia screaming at her in the hallway. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations. Multiple neighbors came up to me and my mother, sharing their own stories of HOA harassment. Mrs. Peterson, whose driveway had always been mysteriously clear, admitted that she was Patricia's cousin and had been getting preferential treatment. Dave clapped me on the shoulder. You did it, man. You actually took down the HOA dictator. I do not know if I took her down, I said. But at least maybe things will get better. Robert Chen, my attorney, had attended the meeting and joined us. That recording about the kickbacks on the snow removal contract, that is fraud. The board is going to have to report it, and the district attorney is going to get involved. Good, my mother said firmly. She has been stealing from all of us. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. The local news picked up the story and it went viral. Elderly woman targeted by HOA gets justice when son uses bulldozer was the headline on the Denver Post. The story got picked up by national news, and suddenly, my phone was ringing off the hook with interview requests. I declined most of them. This was not about fame. It was about my mother being able to live in peace. The HOA board hired an independent auditor to review the finances. They found that Patricia had been skimming money from multiple contracts over a 3-year period. The snow removal contract was just one piece. She had also been taking kickbacks from the landscaping company, the pool maintenance service, and the clubhouse cleaning crew. Total amount, nearly $215,000. The district attorney filed charges: theft, fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of authority. Patricia was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I was not there, but Dave sent me a video that someone had captured on their doorbell camera. Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs, screaming about how this was all a misunderstanding, how she was going to sue everyone. Her trial was set for May. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA was not interested. There was too much evidence, too much publicity, and too many angry homeowners demanding justice. The HOA board voided all the fines against my mother. They also voted to reimburse her for the cost of the damage to her mailbox and garden. They hired a new snow removal company and implemented strict protocols about snow distribution. They even installed cameras on the plows to ensure compliance. Bill Henderson resigned from the board in embarrassment. Cynthia Ferguson moved to another neighborhood. Tom Bradley was elected as the new president, and one of his first acts was to implement a homeowner bill of rights that limited the board's ability to issue arbitrary fines. My mother's story became something of a legend in Littleton. People would stop her at the grocery store to thank her for standing up to the HOA. A local artist even painted a mural on the side of a building downtown showing a bulldozer moving snow, with the caption, "Sometimes you have to push back." In April, Patricia Morrison pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus penalties. Her perfect house went up for sale. Nobody in Pinewood Hills was interested in buying it. The trial became a local sensation. I attended every day, sitting in the courtroom gallery with my mother and about 20 other residents from Pinewood Hills. We wanted Patricia to see us, to know that her actions had consequences. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Jennifer Olivera, who laid out the case methodically. She showed how Patricia had systematically stolen from the HOA over 3 years, using her position to enrich herself while making residents' lives miserable. The harassment of my mother was presented as part of a pattern. When people challenged Patricia's authority, she retaliated. Other victims came forward during the trial. An elderly man named Richard, who had been fined repeatedly for having the wrong shade of tan paint on his house trim. A young couple who had been cited for parking violations, even though they parked in their own driveway. A widow who had been threatened with foreclosure over a disputed tree trimming fee. Patricia's attorney tried to argue that she had been overwhelmed by the responsibilities of the position, that the stress had led to poor judgment. The jury was not sympathetic. They deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. "Mrs. Morrison, you held a position of trust within your community. Homeowners paid their dues expecting honest stewardship of those funds. Instead, you treated the HOA as your personal piggy bank. Worse, when challenged, you used your authority to harass and intimidate residents, including a 74-year-old widow. This court has no sympathy for bullies who abuse power." 4 years in prison, full restitution, 5 years probation after release. Patricia broke down crying as the bailiff led her away. My mother squeezed my hand. "It is over," she whispered. "It is over," I agreed. But there was one more thing I wanted to do. The following weekend, I organized a neighborhood cleanup day. We cleared the last remnants of winter, planted flowers in the common areas, and threw a block party in the clubhouse. Over 100 residents showed up. Tom Bradley, the new HOA president, made a short speech. "The past few months have been difficult for our community. We lost sight of why HOAs exist in the first place, to serve the homeowners and maintain our neighborhood. Under my leadership, that is going to change. We are going to be transparent. We are going to be fair. And we are going to remember that every decision we make affects real people with real lives." Everyone applauded. It felt like the neighborhood was finally healing. My mother planted a new rose bush in her front garden, right where the snow had buried everything. "These are called resilience roses," she told me. "They can survive anything." "Like you," I said. She smiled. "Like all of us." The local hardware store heard about the story and donated new mailboxes to anyone whose had been damaged by the Plows. The Petersons, Patricia's cousin and her husband, came over with a bottle of wine and an apology. They had been complicit in the preferential treatment and felt terrible. "We should have said something earlier," Mrs. Peterson said. "We knew what Patricia was doing was wrong, but she is family and we did not want to cause trouble." "I understand," my mother said graciously. "Family is complicated, but I appreciate you saying something now. We all had dinner together that evening, and the Petersons became regular visitors. Mrs. Peterson and my mother discovered they both loved gardening and started planning a joint vegetable garden for the summer. Dave Richardson got a commendation from the city for his role in helping resolve the situation. The mayor presented him with a certificate at a city council meeting, and Dave hung it proudly in his office next to his business licenses and family photos. Alpine Snow Removal, the company that had been following Patricia's corrupt instructions, lost their contract with the HOA but actually ended up with more business. The story had portrayed them as victims too, following what they thought were legitimate instructions from the HOA. Gary, the owner, reached out to personally apologize to my mother and offered free snow removal for her property for the next 5 years. She politely declined, but thanked him for the gesture. The new snow removal company, Rocky Mountain Snow Services, did such a good job that we had no complaints for the rest of the winter. They distributed snow evenly, kept records of every property they serviced, and even sent a follow-up survey to residents asking about their satisfaction with the service. In June, the neighborhood held its annual summer barbecue. It was the first one in years where people actually seemed happy. Kids played in the sprinklers, adults grilled burgers and hot dogs, and someone set up a volleyball net in the park. My mother was the guest of honor. Tom Bradley presented her with a plaque that read "In recognition of courage and integrity." She cried a little and gave a short speech about how communities are only as strong as their willingness to stand up for what is right. I stood in the back, watching her, and felt proud. My father would have been proud too. As summer turned to fall, life in Pinewood Hills settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA board operated with transparency, posting meeting minutes online and encouraging homeowner participation. Fines were issued only for legitimate violations, and even then, residents were given warnings and opportunities to correct issues before any penalties were applied. My construction business picked up again. I landed 3 major projects, including a full renovation for the Chen family, whose daughter Susan served on the HOA board. Robert Chen referred me to several of his clients, and suddenly, I had more work than I could handle. I hired 2 new employees, both veterans who had been struggling to find steady work. Training them kept me busy, but it felt good to give back. My father had given someone a chance once, and that someone had been me when I was just a kid who wanted to learn the construction trade. In October, my mother called me, excited. "Victor, you need to come over. Look what came in the mail." I drove over after work. She handed me a letter from the Colorado Housing and Community Association. They were giving her an award for advocacy and courage in standing up to HOA abuse. The ceremony was in Denver next month, and she was invited to speak about her experience. "Are you going to do it?" I asked. "I think I should. If telling my story helps even one other person stand up to bullying, it will be worth it." The ceremony was held in a beautiful hotel ballroom in downtown Denver. My mother wore her best dress, the navy blue one she saved for special occasions. She was nervous, fidgeting with her note cards backstage. "You are going to be great," I told her. "What if I forget what to say?" "Then you speak from the heart. That is all anyone wants to hear anyway." When her name was called, she walked to the podium with her head high. The audience was filled with people who had their own HOA horror stories, and they gave her a standing ovation before she even said a word. She told them everything: the snow, the harassment, the fines, the bulldozer, the investigation, the trial. She talked about feeling powerless and afraid, but also about finding the courage to fight back with the help of her son and her community. "Homeowners associations exist for good reasons," she said. They maintain property values, organize communities, and provide services. But when they are run by people who care more about power than service, they become instruments of oppression. We cannot let that happen. We have to hold them accountable. We have to demand transparency. And we have to stand together because alone we are vulnerable. Together we are strong. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People were crying. Several attendees came up afterward to share their own stories and ask for advice. My mother listened to each one, offering comfort and practical suggestions. A reporter from a national news magazine interviewed her for a story about HOA reform. The article ran in December and sparked a conversation about HOA oversight and homeowner rights. Several state legislators reached out, asking for her input on proposed legislation. By Christmas, my mother had become an unlikely activist. She testified before the Colorado legislature about the need for HOA reform laws. She consulted with homeowner groups facing similar situations. She even started a blog documenting HOA abuse stories and offering resources for people fighting back. "I never thought I would be doing this at 74, she told me over Christmas dinner. My wife Sarah and our 2 kids were there along with my mother, and we had invited Dave and his family too. Dad would say you are just getting started, I said. Your father would say I am crazy for taking on the entire HOA industry. He would say that too. We all laughed. The house was warm, filled with the smell of roasting turkey and fresh baked pie. Snow was falling gently outside. The good kind of snow that blankets everything in beauty rather than burying it in malice. In January, exactly 1 year after the Bulldozer incident, the Colorado legislature passed the Homeowner Protection Act. The law required all HOAs to maintain transparent financial records, limited their ability to issue fines without due process, and created an oversight board to investigate complaints of abuse. My mother was invited to the signing ceremony. The governor shook her hand and called her a champion for homeowners across the state. The bill was nicknamed Janet's Law in her honor. That evening, we celebrated at her house. The same house that had been buried in snow, that Patricia Morrison had tried to use as a weapon against an elderly widow who dared to stand up for what was right. "You ever regret it?" I asked her as we sat in her living room, watching the fire crackle. All the stress, the fight, the publicity. She thought for a moment. "No, not even for a second. Your father used to say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I was not going to do nothing, not in my own home, not in my own community. I am proud of you, Mom. I am proud of you too, sweetheart. You did not have to help me. You have your own life, your own family, your own business. But you showed up every single day, shoveling that snow, fighting those battles, standing beside me. That means everything." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance. Outside, snow was falling again, but this time there was no anxiety, no dread. It was just snow. Beautiful, peaceful, and evenly distributed throughout the neighborhood thanks to a snow removal company that actually did its job properly. Pinewood Hills had changed. The neighborhood was no longer ruled by fear and petty tyranny. People attended HOA meetings now, asked questions, held the board accountable. The budget was published quarterly. Decisions were made collectively rather than by decree. Patricia Morrison was still in prison. According to the news, she was a model inmate, working in the library and taking classes. She would be eligible for parole in 3 years. I wondered sometimes if she had learned anything, if she understood the harm she had caused. Then I decided it did not matter. Her story was over. Ours was just beginning. In February, the first anniversary of the Bulldozer incident, someone organized a celebration in the neighborhood. They called it the Snow Day Festival. Kids built snowmen, adults had snowball fights, and Dave showed up with the same bulldozer, decorated with ribbons and a banner that read, "Community Hero." My mother took a picture sitting in the driver's seat, smiling wider than I had seen in years. That photo ended up in the local newspaper with a caption about second chances and standing up for justice. But my favorite moment from that day came later, when the festivities were winding down. A young couple approached my mother. They had just moved to Pinewood Hills, bought Patricia Morrison's old house. "We wanted to thank you," the young woman said. "We read about what happened here, about what you did. It is one of the reasons we decided to buy in this neighborhood. We knew this was a community that stood up for what is right." My mother hugged her, tears streaming down her face. "Welcome home," she said. "Welcome home." That night, I drove home thinking about everything that had happened over the past year. The snow, the harassment, the bulldozer, the trial, the reform. It had all started with one person deciding enough was enough. My phone rang. It was Tom Bradley, the HOA president. "Victor, I wanted to give you a heads up. We just got word that a national news show wants to do a story about Pinewood Hills. They want to talk about HOA reform and how communities can change. They want to interview you and your mother." "What did you tell them?" "I said I would ask you first. It is your story to tell or not tell." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to put this all behind us, move on with our lives. But another part remembered all those people at the award ceremony, all those homeowners suffering under abusive HOAs, all the emails my mother received asking for help. "We will do it," I said. "If it helps one more person stand up to bullies, it is worth it." That is what your mother said you would say. The interview aired in March. It was a good piece, balanced and thoughtful, showing both the problems with HOA overreach and the positive role HOAs can play when run properly. They interviewed residents from Pinewood Hills, showed before and after footage of the neighborhood, and ended with my mother's message about standing together. The response was overwhelming. My mother's blog crashed from the traffic. She received hundreds of emails from people sharing their own stories and asking for advice. Several homeowner rights organizations reached out wanting to partner with her. At 75, my mother had found a new purpose. She was not just a retired school teacher living in a corner house in Littleton, Colorado. She was an advocate, an activist, a voice for people who felt powerless against bureaucratic tyranny, and I got to watch her bloom. As spring arrived and the snow finally melted for good, my mother's garden came back to life. The rose bushes bloomed. The vegetable garden she shared with Mrs. Peterson produced tomatoes and peppers, and her front yard became a showcase of color and life. People would walk by just to see it, to take pictures, to compliment her on the beauty she had created. She would invite them in for tea, listen to their stories, offer advice if they asked for it. The corner lot at 2847 Meadowbrook Lane, once a target of harassment and abuse, had become a symbol of resistance and renewal. And every time it snowed, I would drive by just to check, just to make sure the Plows were doing their job correctly. They always were, because now everyone was watching. The neighbors, the board, the city, and yes, one son with a cell phone camera and access to a bulldozer if needed. We never needed the bulldozer again, but Dave kept it ready just in case. Some battles are worth fighting. Some lines cannot be crossed without consequences. And sometimes, justice arrives on a yellow Caterpillar D5, operated by someone who refuses to let his elderly mother be buried by the petty tyranny of those who mistake authority for power. That is the story of how my mother took on the HOA and won. How a neighborhood transformed from fear to freedom. How one bulldozer and a whole lot of snow became a metaphor for pushing back against injustice. And how, in the end, the only thing that really got buried was the idea that ordinary people cannot fight City Hall, or in this case, their homeowners association. Because they can. We did. And we would do it again if we had to. But mostly, I hope we never have to. Because now, when it snows in Pinewood Hills, it falls equally on everyone, just the way it should be.